for the next fiscal year. It starts in July, goes through next June. And once that budget is delivered to us, to the legislature, the Appropriations Committee will be spending its time working on that. And eventually, before we leave in May, we'll have to have a vote on that. And there'll be estimates of what the revenue is, and they'll match that up directly to how much money is spent in the budget, dollar for dollar. We get around 6 months later, so in the calendar year, we're now in December and in January, and inevitably things have changed that you forecast when you budget, and now you've got new actual numbers have come in, and every year there is an adjustment to the budget, so the Budget Adjustment Act, and the Appropriations Committee up to this point has been working on that. So it's sort of truing up where things actually are to this point and where they are projected, so new projections out to the rest of the year. And the committee doesn't work in isolation. They will sort of try and farm out to the rest of us of the request from the governor to and some committees have a lot of work to do. You can imagine Human Services in particular has a large chunk. Our committee, not so much, but we did get a letter, and we'll have Mike walk us through now what the adjustment are that pertain to us, and then the Appropriations Committee has asked us if we want to respond to do so by Wednesday, I think, next week. So we'll have some time to talk about it today, mull it over the weekend. We'll come back in next week and talk about it again. Anything for us to pull up or that you're going to show us on the screen there, Mike?
I'm going to show you a doc on this. I have to get co-host.
Yep. On it.
All set?
Yep.
So this is the memo that the Committee on Appropriations attached when they emailed the chair. And it says, please review these provisions of the governor's fiscal 2023 budget adjustment. And then the explanations were provided by Finance and Management. And so these are programs that are supposed to fall in part or in whole within the jurisdiction of this committee. And the first would be an appropriation of $3 million to the Secretary of Administration to implement a rural infrastructure assistance program created in E 100.4. And so we're going to come to that in a minute because that's the large part of what this memo is. It's the substantive creation of this rural infrastructure assistance program. But there are some other provisions before you get there. The first is a provision. It basically recaptures money that was unspent in either from fiscal year 2022 or in the first part of fiscal 23 is reverting back to the general fund from any special fund. The first one, nobody has any idea what that is. Like, literally, Act 155 from 2022 was the Rygate bill. Sections 4 and 5 of that did not have $277,000 of appropriations in it. The most it had was $10,000. Checked with JFO, they don't know. Act 155 from 2020, from the previous biennium, is related to nursing and licensing of nursing. And it has no money in it like this. I have no idea what this is. And neither does JFO. So I think maybe you need to ask the Committee on Appropriations to clarify what this reversion is and what it relates to, because it's not clear from this memo.
The ST state match.
Yeah, it's a state match for something under Act 155, but I don't know what that is. So. Another is reversion of the money from the Vermont Food Bank Food Box Program. I think the program's ended and they had some additional funds left over. It was generally considered a success. And then the next is some school food program administration money. I don't know why it's going back. I mean, you probably talked to Rosie. Rosie could use all the money that she could get.
When she was in the other day, she said that they were, so there were two positions created to work on the universal income declaration form, and they had trouble filling both of them.
Okay, that might be it. Yeah. And then the next is that Rural Infrastructure Assistance Program. First, a couple of years ago, this committee, in conjunction with the Senate Ag Committee, created the Rural Economic Development Initiative. And it's effectively a funding at the VHCB, appropriation to VHCB, to fund grant writers to help towns access financial assistance that they wouldn't otherwise have the capacity to do for business development, for infrastructure, for housing. There's a program that already exists at VHCB to do partly what this is doing. What I think is different is the criteria, because the existing READY program is for rural communities, and it's for communities that are designated rural by the federal entities. And there's really only one community or one county that's not rural or semi-rural in Vermont, and that's Chittenden. And so the current READY program is pretty much available to every county except Chittenden in the state. And it has been successful. It's a relatively low appropriation. I think the last time I checked, it was like $300,000, and it's drawn down. It's drawn down over $10 million. So you've used $300,000 to get $10 million for rural communities, and Senator Starr likes to brag about it. It was really Senator Polina that did this, but it's a feather in the hat for the Ag committees.
You've called it the READY Rural Development.
Rural Economic Development Initiative.
That's the existing one.
That's the existing one. So this is the Rural Infrastructure Assistance Program. So they develop a program to support rural communities in accessing and managing competitive grant funds available for clean water initiatives, development of a wide array of housing, broadband development, community recovery, workforce development, business support, and climate change mitigation and resiliency infrastructure projects. Resiliency means climate change or flood. That's a lot of things. But so what are they providing for a lot of things? So let's look at the eligible communities. They'll be designed to serve communities which score 75% or higher on the Vermont Underserved Communities Index developed by the Agency of Administration. I didn't know what that was. So apparently they have proposed what is going to be the Vermont Underserved Communities Index. I looked at this. It's effectively a model where they use 12 criteria and then weight those criteria. I'm not sure how they did the weighting. And then create what they call basically a needs assessment. Or what do they call it? Hold on. It's how they define underserved communities. Those are those that have been denied a full opportunity to participate in aspects of economic, social, and civic life. And then they use a definition that's drawn from a federal executive order on advancing racial equity for what is an underserved community. And then they apparently create this model, and they did some basic modeling, and the green are those communities that are underserved, and the gray are the ones that are not underserved.
We don't have that document, I don't think.
No, I had to get this from JFO because I said to JFO, what the heck is the Vermont Underserved Communities Index? And apparently Doug Farnham has, from the agency administration, has submitted these to the appropriations committees, but you did not receive them in the appropriations memo.
Okay. Maybe, Laura, maybe we can see whether we can get our hands on that. I don't know if
I can,
practically, but
when I have an opportunity and I'm not sharing my screen, I'll be able to forward an email to you.
so it's anyway, we can sort of see from here that it's a fraction of the states.
Right, it's
Fraction of the towns, right?
it is the rural communities, you know, it is communities that have generally, it kind of follows the spine of the Green Mountains. But those communities that have traditionally been those that are generally characterized as rural. But if it's about racial equity, you look at this map, and where are there communities that are underserved because of racial equity? They're like here and here and here and here. So they're not showing up as green on this map. So I don't understand the model. I don't understand if the model is supposed to take into account racial equity or not. So I have that to me is like, I don't understand the eligibility and the model itself. And I have an economics degree, but there's a reason I went to law school and not business school. But I don't understand.
Yes, Representative Rice.
I just want to be clear, you just use language like something along the lines of like, these are the communities that have generally been understood, but this is not a model that's been used before.
This is not a model that's been used before. Right. I don't know. 12 criteria. I don't know what the criteria are. I don't know how they did the weighting. I think for you to fully understand this program and its eligibility, you need more information.
And can I, the map, this is counties? No. What is this compared to that? That's townships.
So this is towns.
Okay.
Yeah, these are all the towns. And you can't see some of them in like, say, Chittenden and Franklin because they're so low priority that they grade them all out. Like you wouldn't be able to tell.
And then
South Burlington. This is a labor part of the model. And they did this more on kind of a countywide, but it's not countywide, it's like regional.
Yeah.
Because they fused Chittenden and Addison and then I don't know. You got to talk to somebody who did this to figure it all out.
Representative O'Brien?
So, let's get this straight, that is there surplus out there and the agency of administration is asking to plug 3 million into this
Right.
model?
Right, and talk about what they're gonna do with that 3 million is the next part of it. They'll make community support services available. I don't know what that means. upon request from eligible communities that include, oh, I do this all the time, I'm sorry. I hit the navigation bar and it just, there we go.
So it's not coming from the General Assembly, it's coming from the administration.
It's coming from the administration. And then you get this, they're gonna provide community needs assessment to evaluate a municipality's needs for water quality, housing, community recovery, climate change mitigation, and other projects related to economic development. So I mean, assessment is the first thing you need before you apply for a grant. You assess what projects you need money for. So I get that. And then they'll do an opportunity assessment to identify available state and federal funding. And then they'll do the application and permitting support to assist municipalities. And then they'll do project management and implementation support to assist successful grant recipients. This is kind of what Ready does already, not all of this, but this is kind of Ready.
So the the highlighted yellow section was provided by the administration
Yes,
that we had at the top.
yeah,
So this is trying to summarize what's above there.
yeah. I think appropriations on their own is going to ask for this to come out of BAA and be put into the big bill so that they can vet this program more thoroughly. But the one thing I want to know for you is there's no agriculture on this.
So why is it in this committee?
I guess,
It's also, so the gray shaded area, sorry, to have you scroll down again, says that we're not the only ones looking at it.
right.
And maybe somebody thought, because it was rural,
Rural.
we don't want.
And because the Rural Economic Development Initiative came out of this committee in the Senate Ag,
Okay,
probably,
yep, that certainly makes sense then. Representative Pearl?
I was just gonna say, is the question actually, why isn't there ag in this rural?
Why didn't they? It may be that one of the 12 criteria has something to do with ag, and we don't know that. I feel like I saw somewhere that, I'm speculating, so I'll stop there, actually.
the one place where I think there is a connection is housing development. Because farm housing is a need.
Yeah,
Housing around the dairy processors is a need. I think housing development is related to farming and some of the dairy processing industries.
Representative Pearl?
Is it, just reading the explanation, do you think this is a sort of response? I know there was a call kind of from especially rural municipalities to have help navigating ARPA funds.
It probably is.
Okay, because it's what it feels like is that this would be funding to help them figure out how to get and use effectively ARPA funds, because I know there was, at least in my community, a plea for help there.
Right. But I mean, VHCV is already doing that with Ready.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, maybe the agency talked to VHCV and VHCV said, no, we don't have the capacity. So the agency said like, oh, we're going to do it ourselves then. I don't know.
Representative Templeman?
I was at a rural caucus meeting where the administration came forth, I believe, with this very proposal and program. And I think it's generally just a response to underserved communities unable to muster the grant writers to apply for ARPA funds. I believe this is exactly what we're looking at here.
I agree.
Representative O'Brien?
I was just saying, it has to be more than coincidence that, like, the rural caucus is pushing a bill now about rural administration capacity, and it's $3 million.
Right. And so I get that. And I understand the need. I don't understand all the language or the criteria that is being proposed. So if you ask me to like.
Yeah, thank you.
The, I think this is, and maybe you can comment here too, Mike. Is it unusual to stand up a new program in budget adjustment as opposed to the budget itself?
I would say that it's not common, but it's not unique. It's been done before. It's usually when it's necessary and timely. Which you could probably argue that this is. You also need to understand the BAA timeframe. The BAA won't get signed until the middle of February, or early March.
Once it goes through both bodies
Yeah.
and then to the governor, and then at that point, there's only 4 months essentially of the year left. Yes, Representative O'Brien.
Understand that's from Ways and Means, but when there's surpluses coming out, are the people, the administrative people and GA people who really understand this stuff, do they say, there's some money that we could plug into these programs?
Right. Yeah. And that's, I always feel awkward doing the budget letters because it's coming from the administration, and they're not always great in their communication about their logic. And so here I get the logic. I don't get why not ready, and I don't get what the criteria are. So somebody's gonna have to explain that stuff.
Representative Lipson.
To follow up on David Templeman's comment, I've been to all those rural caucus meetings, and they talked about towns under a certain population, it might be 1,200, where there is no zoning administrative officer, no town planner, and they are the ones that are pleading for a more streamlined, single form application.
Right, and maybe those are the criteria or part of the criteria.
All those infrastructure, broad range, sewer to reconfiguring zoning maps of village centers where there's barely a village or any land. So I think that it's definitely pushed now at this point in the session, because those communities have thrown their hands up and don't have the means to do it. That caucus is really trying to jumpstart while those ARPA funds exist, in my opinion.
And to your point from earlier, again, I don't see agriculture on here, but I could see where ag could qualify for ARPA funds.
Climate change mitigation.
Yeah.
What about food resiliency? What about a food hub? One of the conversations for a while has been having a cold storage building that will prolong the life of some of the commodity products in Vermont. Why is that not community recovery, workforce development, and business support?
We then, as a committee, having been asked to comment, could amend this. We could send back our recommendations to appropriations that we change this list, add things to it, for example. And I think just in terms of what folks might be working on independently, is legislation to introduce that would most likely be affecting next year's budget rather than money that we've got left over this year. And just to be clear too, when I was sort of launching the conversation, the numbers always change as we go through the year. They've changed in particular this year to our advantage, to the state's advantage. The revenues have been exceedingly large compared to what was expected.
But this is the year to do it. because you still have ARPA money, you still have high state revenue, and the cadet just predicted a 18 to 20% downturn in revenue.
So, and the funding here, the $3 million then would go towards basically technical assistance. It's not directed to any project.
It goes to community support services. So I'm not sure what that is.
Okay.
Grant writing.
Well, that's, then they say it's a needs assessment, which isn't, you're gonna do, I've done grant writing and you have to first identify what your project or potential project is. And so that's what that is. And then the opportunity assessment is to find the funds, state or federal, and then do application where you actually write your grant right. And then project management. So project management, they're gonna manage projects. So
That's what they claimed to me.
Did you have another question, Representative Temple?
No, I just wanted to mention that project management was one of the things they covered at the.
Got it, yep.
World Cup.
Okay. So I think we've got a couple of questions here. Possibly we might want to have somebody come in to answer some of the questions about intent or, clarify things. There's the mysterious Act 155 question, and I'll talk to appropriations just to see if that's one that's easy to answer. I think the second one on the list there is fairly straightforward. There was surplus funding that, and maybe that's because there was funding available for another source, but the program worked well. And then that third one may be just a staffing explanation. So thoughts or other things that we should be asking?
You had mentioned that we can add amendments to this.
I think that's certainly within our,
And what would the process be to achieve that?
So I think we would, just given the time, I don't think we'll launch into it now, but we'll come back Tuesday morning after our floor and before lunch to conversation here. And so in the meantime, you can be thinking about, anybody can be thinking about what you might want to do with that. And I think in this instance, no. And then our time is a little bit limited. You can talk to Mike too if you've got thoughts. And I don't know whether so when our response can be informal, like you walk down to appropriations and knock on the door and say, here's what we think, or we can make it. And if we're gonna draft language, you probably want to write something, I would think. And
yeah, I've seen the full suite. People just walk down the hall, people email, you write a letter, you write your own bill, you write it. The healthcare and human services committees use a table because their letter is usually pretty long and they just go through and list the recommendation. You've got option.
And I think there's also the question that you've raised about, could this fall under an existing program? Why not? So we'll try to get some answers for that, either ahead of time or have somebody in next week. Anybody else? Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm gonna stop sharing and then I'm gonna send Alara the document that has the committees.
Yeah. We're all set, yeah, good. Thanks, everybody.